Good morning and good evening, everybody. Assuming everybody able to see my screen. Okay. Good morning and good evening. And for some people, it might be a little bit good night too. I don't know. Thanks a lot for joining this particular webinar. And today we are actually going to talk more about Agile Transformation and AI and how we can actually go about implementing these two together. What do you mean by the change mindset? That is a very common terminology that we are speaking about, especially when anybody is going to talk about Agile. So that's exactly what we are going to talk about. So before jumping in, let me actually give a kind of brief overview who I am. And technically, I'm coming from a very strong technological background, and I've been working with a variety of industries for the past more than 2 decades. And I've actually managed very complex projects, including Agile, traditional, hybrid kind of projects, implementing SAP, CRM solutions, and various other things. On top of it, I'm also a local PMI chapter lead, volunteer, mentor, and coach. So I actually take a lot of project management related type of classes and as well trainings. And in fact, some of the university students, I also actually cross-train them. Then the next one is basically, I'm also serving as a board member on the IPMA as one of the lead contributor within the IPMA board. And I'm also a certified IPMA project director level A. And in addition to that, my passion is also on the robotic side. So I also actually conduct robotic session for kids in order to participate in STEM and STEAM program. And as well, I introduce the project management concepts and agile management concepts as part of that particular training so that young adults and the young people can actually take care of the meaning, understand this particular new nuances, and they can actually teach the meaning. They can actually understand the project management right from the beginning itself. On top of it, I'm also a certified agile from the agile certified coaching perspective, training facilitator, and as well at the enterprise level. And I do have various other certifications, including SPC, etc. Before going on, this is a kind of agenda which I wanted to cover from the topic perspective. And the major topic, what we are talking about is Agile Transformation and AI, why we are actually mixing those two, and why do we need to actually talk about that, especially both of them are actually talking about change mindset. Given the fact AI, artificial intelligence, when I'm talking about, people need to have some kind of change mindset to accept the automation. And as part of the automation, how does the agile can actually complement both of them together? That's exactly what we are going to talk about as far as today's session is concerned. Okay. This is just a kind of a general definition of agile, meaning it's basically agile meaning you are able to move quickly and as well easily and swiftly, but at the same time, while you are traveling that fast, your kind of decision making skill and as well making sure the other audience are also able to adapt and adopt is very much key. And that's also we are going to talk about as far as this session is concerned. Okay. Okay. So in this executive summary, I'm actually going to talk about mainly around agile transformation, which is being embraced by the companies across most industries. Doesn't matter which industry it is. Right now, everybody is actually using that as a kind of a buzzword, and they are jumping onto the bandwagon of agile. And it has its own nuances and it has its own advantages. And if it is not going to be managed properly, it has its own disadvantages. So we are also going to talk about more about those and as well a kind of a timeline on how we can implement the same transformation to any such industries and what is it we need to do to be more success, especially within this agile world. And as part of the agile, we are also going to talk about artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence, where I'm talking about, I'm not going to focus more onto the technical aspect of it, but whereas I'm actually going to talk more about the automation and how you can actually transfer your existing knowledge of understanding and then use the change mindset as a concept. And from there, how you can actually take the agile into the next level, and how you can actually make the overall project or program that you're managing is successful. And while I am actually talking, I will also refer to some of my real-time experience in the way the transformation that I have actually managed it and the complexity that I've encountered, and I can actually highlight few of them. So this one is basically, there are 6 building blocks which I have actually framed up, meaning I've actually gathered the information. Technically, these 6 building blocks are actually most helpful for any kind of agile transformation and as well artificial intelligence. First is basically the customer decision journey. Okay, the question is, for any kind of given project, obviously any program or any kind of product development, customer decision is very much important, and that too, the journey to be having to have a kind of a successful end product, the customer needs to actually buy in, and customer needs to actually accept that particular product. What do we need to do? So that's the first building block that we need to actually tackle it, so that we can easily frame and then we can actually move forward in this particular journey. The next one is organization. The organization is basically, again, any kind of new things that we are introducing, there will be always be reluctance in accepting it and adapting it and adopting it. And in that case, the organization needs to have some kind of buy-in. The buy-in in this case are the key stakeholders. How can we actually implement that such kind of strategy for them? And what is it we need to do in order to really to convince them so that they can buy in this? That's exactly the second building block which we need to ensure that is addressed properly. The third one is the data analytics. Why am I using data analytics in this case is technically for the artificial intelligence, the predictability, that's what in this case, the data analytics, which I'm actually going to use. And this data analytics is actually going to play a major role in any kind of decision making, whether it is to be more success or whether you are actually predicting any kind of future products and its features, etc. All those things, the data analytics plays a key role. So as part of the building blocks, this is also very, very key for us. And we need to ensure that is also taken into consideration. The next building block, which is the strategy and the innovation. Again, we have a kind of a pointers right now. We have a kind of a building block which we have established as a base foundation. Now we need to have something called strategy and innovation. We primarily need to focus on the future value on the drive fueled by the experimentation. And again, agile, basically you can actually use various testing methodology like test driven development and various other kind of similar kind of methodology to really to do a trial and run to make sure the product is actually going to be successful, and at the same time it is shippable, plus at the same time the customer will like it. So that kind of strategy and innovation you need to put in forth right from the beginning, so that your journey can actually be more smooth sailing and it will be more success. Now after all of these things are done, once you have become a kind of a mid-level of maturity that you can actually make yourself as a measurement perspective, you can actually introduce something called process automation, because some of these things are going to be repetitive. Some of them are actually going to look for some enhancements, some other maturity that you need to put in place. Then in that case, you are actually going to talk about the process automation. In this process automation, say for example, you can actually reduce some of the mundane tasks and how you can actually improve. All of these things are once again going to get into the concept of the change mindset. So every single blocks that you are actually building it, you need to have something called change mindset, and you need to actually start inculcating that change mindset concept right from the beginning, so that your stakeholders, your audience, your customers, and you by yourself will be able to embrace that, and as well you will be able to accept it. That's exactly what it is. And after the process automation, you need to use some kind of technology. It can be anything. Say, for example, you are actually implementing a bigger ERP application, which is in this case SAP. You're talking about technology from the SAP perspective, but how can I actually introduce Agile and AI together, where I can actually introduce the change mindset so that the buyers and the customers and as well all the stakeholders at your organization can accept it. That's exactly what is this. So this particular building block you need to establish right from the beginning. When you are doing it, pretty much you know how the change mindset can actually happen, and what do you mean by change mindset, and so on and so forth. Now I'm actually talking about Agile Transformation and AI capability model. Okay, what do you mean by AI capability model? Again, similar to other capability model like a CMMI and all those things, Agile also has its own capability model because this one is actually is a brand new from the terminology perspective, but as a matter of fact, Agile has been existing for quite some time. It is nothing is new, but it is being observed and consumed as new right now, so that the new technology, new actually concepts can be used for a better kind of a product feature development. That's why it is considered to be new. So from the capability model is basically, as I said, each of these building blocks which we are talking about are going to be based on customer driven, customer focus. And how can you engage the customers, and what kind of user experience that you can actually do, what kind of customer experience that you can actually build upon. All those things are very, very key driver for our overall success from the transformation perspective. But at the same time, in this particular journey, again and again, I'm stressing it out, change mindset, because the change mindset is actually very, very complex. If you're not introducing this at early stage, and if you wanted to introduce this at a middle, as far as the delivery is concerned, you are actually going to face a lot of reluctance from the audience and as well from the stakeholders, and they might not like the agile as a whole. That's why it is starting with the engaging the customers are very, very important. And again, some of these kind of points which I've actually covered are basically what are the kind of key things that you are actually going to do as part of engaging your customers. For example, digital advising and customer lifecycle management, customer data management, and online and mobile commerce. So all of these particular components are actually very much key, because right now the technology has grown crazy, and every single people are actually running either with a mobile or tablet or either some other kind of mechanism. So on that note, you need to engage the customers in all the directions, in all the ways, however the possibility. So that's your first capability model that you need to establish as a base foundation to really to go for it. The next one, which is talking about, is the empower the employees. Okay, the empowering the employees is, again, it's very, very key. Just by introducing the new concepts, you cannot actually say that the transformation can actually be a successful journey, because you need to actually empower the people who are actually going to produce, who are going to work on it, who are actually going to deliver it. So that's exactly the empowering the your employees in this case. It can be your own organization, it can be your own customers, it can be anybody. So that's what it is. And the agile talent management and development. And moreover, this is going to be in-house agile talent development. How can you build your own structure? How can you build your own team who can actually ready to accept the agile, plus at the same time, how can you actually make them to really train the others? So that talent management pool is very important. And employee mobility in this case is basically how transferable they are, how swift they are, and what do you need to do in order to really to bring them up to speed. All those concepts and everything, that's very much important. That's your second capability model that you need to build upon. All of these things are actually going to be very helpful when you are building it in the beginning itself, because agile is actually a kind of long journey, provided if none of these are actually being established properly. And this needs to be established at the early stage. And that's why the reason sometimes some of the clients where I've actually worked, I don't want to name the client, but at the same time I was actually working with a banking client, and in that particular banking client, they were actually talking about agile, and still even now they are talking about transformation. The main reason, because of various other kind of understanding and various other pool of people that are coming on board in order to help them to transfer and transform a lot of things, and they were not able to be able to get enough out of it. That the reason is the engagement of the customer, engagement of the employee, and as well the adaptation and adoption was having a lot of challenges, and they did not fix the problem in the beginning itself. They let it go, and then they were actually thinking, okay, I can actually put a kind of 6 months plan, 9 months plan, and 12 months plan, and they thought everything can actually be done, and so that they can easily smooth sail in the agile transformation journey. But that was failure. But right now they are actually going and doing a lot of retrospective and introspective in order to really to bring up to speed, so that they can actually come out of the derailment to the straight path right now. Okay, and optimize your operation. So in this case, the AI is coming into play, and as part of your capability model, you are actually building the optimization, so that agile actually encourages optimization. Agile actually encourages a lot of retrospective, and through the retrospective, it's actually expecting you to optimize more efficiently than you can think of. That's why the optimizing the operations, and in this case, the AI is going to come into play, the predictability and all those other kind of driving factors. Now, finally, you are actually going to do something called transform your products. What do you mean by transformation of your product? The final end product delivered to the customer. Now the customer sees the value in it, and the value realizations are going to be achieved as part of the transformation of your product. In this whole journey, you need to watch out. One thing is, make sure when you are building the capability model, you are actually encouraging the change mindset right from the beginning, and you are continuing to follow that to be more success even at the end. After transforming the products, it doesn't mean the agile ends over there. You need to do something called sustainment. That sustainment is actually what the one which is going to be the great lever, which is actually going to be dragged upon, and it is actually going to fetch you more value than what you can think of. Okay. Again, these are kind of emerging technology trends which everybody is aware of it, and in all these particular area, the agile can actually play a bigger role, AI can actually play a bigger role. And I don't want it to go through deep each and every single component of it, because at this point of time, that's not what we are talking about. These, all I'm saying is, emerging technology trends are very much the key driver for our successful agile transformation projects. Okay. I was earlier talking about the capability model. This one is the capability quadrant, or how you can actually get the success out of it. And if you can really see the core functions, what you can do, the management board and the stakeholders at the top level. And on your left-hand side, you can actually see the growth and operations. And the right-hand side, you are going to see risk and competencies. If you really put all these particular four quadrants, you can actually see how much of importance is actually given when you are building that particular capability model. Make sure this is also being injected into that capability model, so that your risks are achieved, meaning risks are identified earlier stage and it is rectified as part of your journey itself. Okay. Now, I think we talked about the capability model. We talked about in general, what do you need to do, etc. But now I'm actually going to talk about something called levers, which are going to drive your agile transformation. There are two things. One is called growth drivers. The other one is the operational improvement. What do you mean by the growth drivers? When you are introducing agile into any kind of organization, obviously that's a new thing that you are putting into place. Second is, you need to make sure the change mindset is introduced at early stage. Now, once you do all those things properly in the beginning itself, your growth drivers are actually automatically going to see a value realization appropriately. So in this case, the growth drivers is the demand generation, reach and selection, purchase process, customer experience. Okay, this one I have taken into a kind of any kind of product development. That's what the example looks like, pretty much oriented towards that. This can actually be tailor-made and custom-made to any industry. That is not at all a problem. But these are the kind of key things which you need to look for from the growth driver perspective, which is actually going to finally go as a business driver levers and business enabler levers, which is on the operational. So from the business driver lever perspective, you need to create something called demand generation. How can you create a demand generation? People might ask, how can agile can actually do the demand generation? Demand generation is pretty much, it's nothing but what is your want, what is your like, and what you can achieve. That can actually happen in any industry, doesn't matter whether there is an agile or not. But once you know exactly the want and the like and the dislike, technically you are actually creating something called demand. Then you are actually trying to compete against the market, and then you are actually trying to push it. Moreover, agile, actually you have to visualize it as a product development. If you are visualizing every single task into a product development, technically you will be more success in the agile than anything else. It doesn't mean I'm not telling about the other side of project management methodology, such as the traditional waterfall and all those things. I'm not even talking about that. I'm not even doing any comparison against it. But I'm talking about agile is a modular based execution. And every time you need to actually go by the modular base, you know exactly how much of refinement that you can actually apply, how much of better thing that you can actually do, and how much of efficiency that you can actually come up. All those things are actually ending up in something called quality. And the quality is the kind of a key for agile. And as per the manifesto, that's exactly the key. And moreover, while you are doing it, every time they are actually expecting you to do a lot of trial and run, a lot of test driven methodology, and various other methodology also can be combined together. But at the same time, the growth drivers are the kind of a key for any kind of organizations to be success. That's exactly what I'm talking about as far as the growth driver is concerned. Now, operational improvement in this case, I'm talking about something called sustainment. First of all, improve your existing operational efficiency, then you actually maintain the sustainment so that it can actually give you a throughput for what you are looking for and how you are looking for. So that's exactly the process efficiency, asset utilization, agility, and new business models. Asset utilization is basically how you can reuse, repurpose your existing tools, your existing mechanisms. What can you do, etc. That's exactly what the asset utilization is. Agility, which everybody knows, as fast as you can. And new business models, while you are actually doing all these things, if the growth drivers are success, and the operational drivers are also coming into a kind of a right direction, pretty much you are actually looking for new business models. When you're introducing new business model to meet the demand and the market, you can easily tackle it. You can easily challenge the existing competitor that the maturities are actually achieved in a better way when you are using agile than supposed to anything else. Okay. So this is an example which I wanted to walk you guys through so that you can easily relate how the growth drivers and the operational improvement can actually work together. For example, demand generation, the brand awareness, the brand internet through social. So you can actually see all of these particular pillars or the sections and the columns that I'm talking about, how all of these examples can actually drive your overall transformation and how you can achieve it to be more success. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, within this particular growth drivers, I am actually taking into a matrix level what you can gain and what kind of customer experience that you can actually get out of it. That's exactly what I'm talking about in this particular slide, where it is talking about targeted audience, one-to-one audience, fragmented audience, and the mass audience. So that means basically using the agile, using the AI transformation, and using the agile transformation, how can I achieve all of these things to have a better customer experience? And basically, it will be having something called interaction capabilities, customer data effectiveness. Again, all of these things can actually be collaborated, and you can actually easily collect all these particular data points and you can drive it accordingly to your success. And for each of these particular metrics which you're talking about, on the right hand side where I'm talking about interaction capabilities, where I'm telling real-time omni-channel interactions, and I'm talking about one-way messaging. Again, if you really look into it, how the x-axis and the y-axis, how it's been divided, and it covers pretty much every single audience, fragmented audience, mass audience, one-to-one audience, and targeted audience. So that means basically agile can fit into any industry very well, provided if you are driving it in the beginning stage in the right way. And that actually includes the change mindset. And you really need to actually practice on the change mindset. And the change is basically very, very important. And at the same time, change is inevitable. To become more success than who you are, you have to change yourself, you have to evolve yourself. And that's exactly what agile is preaching. Agile is not preaching anything new. It's expecting you to actually become more efficient, how you can actually be more efficient, and what kind of refinement that you can actually put in place. That's where the concept of retrospective and introspective is coming into play. And retrospective is very, very key for any kind of agile project to be more success. Okay. Now, this one is talking about shift in the customer experience. Okay, you guys might have been thinking, I'm talking about agile transformation, I'm talking about AI. Now I talked about capability model, customer experience, and all those things. But I haven't even come to the core topic of what is it exactly I'm actually trying to address. What is the pain points? We will come and look into those in the further coming slides. Okay, shift in the customer experience. Okay, while introducing this agile transformation and all those things, there is a shift in the customer experience. What do you mean by shift? Probably before agile is getting introduced into that product development, the customer experience might have been compromised. Maybe probably they don't know exactly what is to expect, but you are actually trying to introduce a new concept like customer experience. So then you are expecting for every single product that they are buying it, you wanted to know their feedback, you wanted to know how the product behaves, you wanted them to really to provide enough kind of information of whether it's a success, whether it's a failure. That is nothing but the shift in the customer experience, because several years ago, you can actually walk into any store, you can buy the product. If you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you don't actually report to them. But now, if you can see, people are evolving, people are changing. That's the change mindset. Plus, at the same time, they are actually coming into a different thing, saying that this does not satisfy me. What do I need to do to better? So then the people who are actually developing the product, they are introducing user experience, they are introducing change experience and customer experience, etc. This one is nothing but change mindset, because they actually have adapted themselves to really to think in a different way, think like a customer. That's exactly what it is. The traditional process which I told and the modern process, that's exactly what I've been explaining about the shift in the customer experience. Okay, this is a very interesting one. Non-stop customer experience model. What do you mean by non-stop customer experience model? Technically, you are actually going into cyclical effect, which is nothing but you are actually going to consider, sorry, you are going to discover, you are actually consider, discover, purchase, use. So technically, if you really see, this needs to go in a cycle way, because the discover and the consider is basically that those are the promises that you are actually making it, that the product will be behaving, and you are actually giving that to the customer. Who's going to evaluate it? Customer is going to evaluate it. In what sense? They are actually going to evaluate when you deliver it, and the deliver is actually going to come basically purchase and use. So that's a kind of a key driver. Then you are actually introducing the customer to buy the product and as well use the product in an efficient way. If any feedback is coming in, you are actually going to push it to back to them. So this is basically, it's going in a cycle where you are actually introducing something called retrospective every time, and then you are actually finally making a better model. That's why I have actually captured it as a non-stop customer experience model, where they are pretty much in a cyclical way and they are actually getting much better at it. Here is where the AI is going to come into play. Till now, we have been talking about a lot of agile transformation and concepts behind it, but also merging with the AI concept and AI capability, etc. Now, operational improvement. So this one is primarily around your overall artificial intelligence that you are actually going to come into play. I'm not actually going to talk more about data language, machine language, or I'm not going to talk about data algorithms or anything like that. This one is overall by introducing process improvement, by introducing process efficiency, how the operational improvement can occur. That's exactly the AI is going to come. Why AI? In this case, the predictability. Basically, you are thinking the customer will buy the product, yes or no. That's a predictability. And how you can actually introduce that. That's exactly what I'm talking about as far as this slide is concerned, where it's talking about process efficiency, asset utilization, agility, new business models. Now, if you really put everything put together, everything when you execute, you need to have a change mindset, but at the same time, you are also doing a lot of refinement, which is nothing but improvement, retrospective, etc., etc. You are actually doing that. And then finally, you are actually managing it to be more successful. And that's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. So now, if you really look into it, process automation, stage one. So this one is a typical supply chain kind of model, which I've actually given the example in this case. This can actually be used for any kind of product development. It doesn't need to be only supply chain, but it can actually be it can easily be custom made for any industry. But this is how you actually normally look into it. First one is you administrate your current schedules within the supply chain. Then you are actually going to monitor and retake the production, etc., and how it's going to be distributed, etc. Then you are actually going to do a kind of a regular check-in on the interval. In this case, you are doing the retrospective here. Then the stage 4 is different type of strategy. So where you are actually the feedback loop which is coming into play is a stage 4. Then finally you are actually going into working efficiently to improve better, and finally control this, sustain this, and deliver this. Okay. Now let's go to the core subject. What is it exactly we need to do? Okay. So in this case, for every single of such kind of changes and innovation that you are going to put in place, you need leaders support. So this one is talking about agile leadership. Basically, the role of the leaders on the right hand side, the conditions of the agile team on the left hand side, where I am actually giving it, right? So basically, the roles of the leaders is they need to have something called long-term vision, and they need to communicate that appropriately. How can the leaders can do that? Leaders needs to provide the long-term vision. What do they want to achieve, and why is that? Then in that case, how can they actually use agile for them to be more success? That's exactly the long-term vision. And the second one, which is the set and sequence strategic priorities. So for example, my real-time example, which I can tell within the financial institutions where I was actually responsible for doing the agile transformation, they started actually doing a kind of agile transformation in a big bang approach. And then they were not even able to go at least 6 to 7 months. They found out it is not even going anywhere. They started in an ad hoc way. They started immediately saying that everybody, okay, follow the agile process and methodologies. And they did not really set the sequence and the strategic priorities to see whether what can be done. One important thing which everybody needs to understand is when you are starting agile, start with a smaller piece. Make sure you are able to showcase the value driven out of that to your leaders. Convince the leaders. Once you convince the leaders, you become the change agent, you become the kind of a change mindset ambassador, and you can actually easily convince anything can be done within that particular organization. It's tough than being said, of course, but at the same time, when you are actually interacting with the leaders, when you are actually showcasing some of the value, that's why you need to take a pilot approach. That's why you need to ensure certain sequence of strategic priorities and communicate this to the leaders to help them to understand. That's exactly what you have to do. As a role of a leader, you might not be a leader sitting at the CEO, at the CFO, CTO level. No, you don't have to be. But you might be playing a kind of direct type of role, leadership role in a different capacity. You can also be the change agent for that. Then the third one is basically building the organizational capabilities to achieve these goals. It's very, very key important, and you need to actually help the leaders to understand what is it you want to achieve, how you can achieve, and then probably they will be able to help you in turn to say that how can we build the organization capabilities, etc. Now, the next one is the solving the problems and remove the constraints. This is very much inevitable, but you need to come up with the innovation, how you can solve the problem, what you can do. That's why the reason you are actually using the agile in a modular approach. So each module, when it is becoming failure, you are able to immediately address it and then refine it. Now on the left hand side, conditions of the agile team. Problems are complex, solution seems unclear. Yes, of course, because they don't they don't have the kind of concept of what is agile. They are not getting trained, or they are not being trained, etc. So we need to actually focus on that. So as a change agent, make sure the team is empowered with all the stuff. Then the project requirements are likely to change. Yes, of course, agile requires, that's why it is actually going in a modular approach. Each of the change in the scope that is being identified, you are managing it as a kind of a next backlog item or a future backlog items. But you are still maintaining the same scope across the board. But you are actually managing it, all these things, through multiple sprints. When you are doing it such things, this change is easily acceptable, this change is easily manageable. That's exactly what you need to do, and you need to communicate that to your team so that the team is understanding how the team can actually embrace themselves. They really need to get trained, first of all. That's a dependency there. Then close collaboration with end users is feasible. So in this case, you are actually engaging the product owners in the beginning stage itself, so that you are actually helping them to understand how the development team is building the product, and how, as a kind of the key individual from the product manager perspective is also able to contribute to the overall success. That's what it is. The next one is the creative teams will outperform command and control groups. Yes, of course. Once you become more creative in solving some of these particular problems, it becomes so easy for you to solve any kind of complex problems. That's exactly what is going on there. Okay. Now, one more thing which I wanted to highlight is in this particular transformation, we as a change agent, we as a change mindset ambassador, there are certain questions that we need to ask, critical questions that are to the management. For example, how can Agile Transformation and AI help me to improve financial performance? Because every single organization, end of the day, they are going to talk about my ROI. Where is my ROI? That's all. If you can prove it to me as a better ROI, I'm happy to convert myself into that particular journey. That's not a problem. So that means this is a question which you need to ask, and you need to actually set some priorities, and you need to set some expectation with the leaders. How are you planning to achieve that? Once you convince that, it becomes so easy and you are able to tackle that, right? And the next one is, where is the politically, sorry, where is the profitability, a probability of our products and services threatened by the agile? For example, there is always a competitor. There is always a kind of a threat. And how can you manage that? What do you need to do? So those are the questions which you need to ask your management, and the management needs to help you in order to become more success. Then only you can lay out a kind of a plan properly. These are chief delivery officer, chief management, and CHRO. So all of these things, it's basically, it is the entire slew of people, all the C-suite of people are coming into play, and they all need to actually address all of your concerns. Then only you will be able to take the agile journey into a successful. Okay. Again, these are the kind of core critical management questions which I have framed up. Maybe you guys can actually use this as a kind of a guide for your any kind of future transformation, and you can address that accordingly. Okay. Now the maturity model. Okay. Again, maturity model is very, very key for any of such kind of nuances being introduced. And how can you achieve that maturity model? It has its own journey. Initially, you are going to crawl, then you know how to walk, and then finally you know how to run. So the crawl, walk, and run, if you really talk about, that's the agile mobility. And you are talking about initiate, rotate, align, optimize, automate, transform, and improve. You can see how the journey is actually going to take it out. In each of these particular pillars between the crawl, if you're talking about initiate, rotate, and align, you need to have the retrospective every time. You need to have feedback loop implemented every time. Then only from a crawl, you can easily walk. Otherwise, you are going to crawl only. That's where you need to have some kind of retrospective in every single step that you are taking it before you can say, I am running fast. Okay. So the maturity model which we saw, now the maturity levels. The levels is, there is no maturity. When you are talking about in the crawl, it is not going to have any maturity. Then you are actually going to have something called conceptual level. Then you are going to go with the defined level. Then you are going to go with the integrated, then finally transform successfully. For each of these particular journey, it takes its own sweet time. And you need to really, really understand the nuances for each of these particular levels, how you can improve yourself, how you can evolve yourself. It's very important. Okay. Okay. Here is the execution framework that I've actually put it on. For example, right from the inception stage all the way to the sustainment stage, how you can do that. And you can actually see initially you have a strategy, then the current state, you are going to take the current state as is, and how you can actually evolve yourself to a future state and put a kind of a roadmap, perform and implement, and finally sustainment in this case is monitor. For all of these things, you can see the underneath, very, very key, change management and communication, governance evolution, and program and project management PMO. So these three pillars are very, very important to have your journey successful. And for every single pillars, what I'm talking about, strategy, current state, and future state, make sure the change mindset is completely educated and transparent, and moreover, people understand that. to be more success. So now you can see under the strategy, what are the key things which I've actually put it on? What are the various components and the drivers that is actually going to talk about, and how you can actually go about in managing it. Okay, now execution framework. So the sixth level of successful execution, right? So which is nothing but target the operating model layer, then the people layer, then the technology layer, then the channels layer, then the process layer, and the service layer. If you really see every single thing, you are actually going to involve yourself in your agile transformation, in your AI transformation. Every single things you are actually going to get involved, and every single thing will involve something called change mindset. And that's why it is very much important these six layers are effectively managed right from the beginning. And identification of all of these things, prioritization of all of these things are very, very key. Okay. Now, this is basically the end-to-end work stream execution. Now we are talking about more of execution, what is to be done, theoretically, what can be done. And those are the kind of concepts which I've taken into next level. And I'm giving you in a different flavor and perspective, how certain things can actually be executed so that you will understand better. Okay. For all of these things, you have to establish the organizational governance model. It's very, very key. Okay. When you're doing an agile transformation, governance is very important. Not only for agile, but in general, the governance are very key player. That's exactly that the agile will actually make you to go for a successful delivery. So if you're talking about self-direction, corporate governance, IT governance, aligned strategically, you can see how things are actually being aligned here. And this is a structure and the pillar which I have established as part of my previous other agile experiences. And given the fact of a lot of working knowledge in those particular areas, this is what I feel that you can actually manage and manipulate within your organization to have a successful transformation journey. Okay, now you can see how I'm actually able to take it to the next level. Now execution framework is established, delivery framework is established. Now I'm talking about how I can actually get the value out of it and what are the risk levels that I'm going to identify. You can see strategic importance, budget limitations. Yes, of course, the budget limitations are going to come into a major play when you are actually implementing not only agile, any kind of projects. So the prioritization needs to happen and some other kind of discussion needs to happen, etc. Then the availability of the people is very key, not only forming the team, but as well making sure the team is fully empowered. That's exactly what it is. And finally, once you are establishing this, you can see the return of investment, cost of delays. Why I have put the cost of delays as part of the return of investment? That's because when you are actually having any kind of failure in all of these three, for example, there could be a cost of delay, and that can actually impact the return of investment. That's why the reason I've actually put it on at this level. And finally, the risk level, because of the cost of delay, what are the risks? So this three is very much important for you to become more successful in order to execute the strategic, budget, and availability process. Okay, now this one is basically talking about the team's involvement, etc. Right? Okay. Customer experience team, business process team, technology systems team. Now the structure is formed. Now you are actually establishing all those things. As part of the customer experience team, you are identifying all the experiences that could significantly affect external, internal customer decisions, behaviors, and satisfaction. In this case, the product owners, all the champions are going to be played over here. Business process team, in general, they lay out the process, etc. That's what they are. Technology was a final delivery, individuals or team of people who are going to do that. Now, this is a common structure of how the agile is actually going to get executed. Now you can see product owner, gather, and the filter. So now I don't think so I need to go explaining about this particular picture, but this is very much self-explanatory. So we can actually skip on to the next level. But this is how everything is going to be done from the delivery perspective of the agile transformation. Okay. Now we have spoken about maturity model. We are talking about all the pillars, etc. There are barriers. Obviously, any kind of journey which you are going to take it, you are going to have these kind of barriers. And how are you going to overcome? That's a key for your success. And you can see the barriers are company culture, lack of experience, insufficient management support, inconsistent practices and process, resistance to change. Here is the change mindset, which I've been actually telling right from beginning to now, that this has to be propagated, this has to be cultivated, this has to be inculcated across the board every time. Then only it will be more success. And you can see the key to success is consistent practices and process, common tools and across all the teams, agile consultants and trainers, executive sponsorship, internal agile and supportive team. Once you start establishing this properly, you are actually going to see all these particular success. So this one is basically the overall, I can say, the cyclical approach. What do you need to do and how the values are getting driven after the transformation or as part of the transformation journey, and who and all is the visibility is in this case is basically the burn down, velocity, burn up and testing, etc. How it's going to be. Okay. Now we have spoken quite a lot of information related to the transformation journey and using the AI. Now we need to talk about why AI actually, we also spoke about why AI is actually coming to the next, which I've already outlined, which is nothing but the change mindset. And that's why the reason. Now, this is a kind of a plan which I have actually implemented with one of my client in order to have a proper successful transformation, and they were able to do this successfully, right? So you can see the 3 months is basically 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months plan. What is your velocity and how things are actually going to get transformed, etc. Okay, I believe I covered pretty much the concept of the agile transformation, what are all the maturity models, and what do you need in order to be more success? What's the kind of a timeline that we are talking about from the overall execution perspective and other nuances, etc. Now, I think I'm opening up the floor for the questions. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, but at the same time, the topic is very huge. And within an hour, it's going to be very difficult to cover every single detail. That's why I have to rush up. I hope you don't mind. Okay. I think Sonali is asking a question, customer experience and user experience, can we have any one team? Both of them are too different. Customer experience and user experience are slightly different. The reason why it is this particular experience, what we are talking about is the end customer experience. The user experience is before coming to the end user, you are actually going to make sure internally you are trying it out, internally you are going to be successful. Sometimes I have seen these two can actually be in a one team, but only thing is their approach, their ideology behind it needs to be slightly changed. I hope that answers the question. Anybody has any other questions?
Sridhar, I don't think there's any more questions, so we can move on to the next slide. I think there's one more question from Punit on the chat
Yeah,
box.
on the chat box. Can we take an example of IoT? In what sense? Maybe probably, if Punit, can you explain to me when you say, can we take an example of IoT in what context? In terms of AI implementation, but in terms of AI implementation, yes, you can actually take an example of IoT as an AI implementation, because everything is basically automation you're talking about, process improvement also you're talking about as part of that. So yes, you can take an example, yes. Hope that answers the question, Punit. Okay, what kind of, I think, Bert Fabry asked a question: what kind of areas in an agile transformation do you consider optimal to use AI or machine learning on to get some added value? I think we are mixing two different things here. The reason why I'm saying is what kind of areas in agile transformation. Again, everything is a concept of change mindset. AI is also change mindset. Agile transformation is also a change mindset. Now, if you're talking about optimal to use, is basically it depends upon your use case scenario. For example, machine learning, you can actually use it heavy duty in the life science industry. Machine learning, you can actually use it in the production space too. But at the same time, when you're talking about AI is again talking about machine learning as well, because both of them are actually going to get combined together, because all of these things are revolving around predictability. So when you are actually using predictability as a baseline, certainly you can actually use agile into it. And then how you are actually going to do a slice and dice, that matters a lot in order to answer your question. But hope I answered your question. Okay. Puneet, to answer your question, usually in how many months we get the ROI on such implementations? It's a very general kind of a generalistic type of an approach in this case. The question is, as I was telling, agile, don't try to do it in a big bang. Your ROI is not going to be as much as you can expect. You take a initial pilot of one business unit, see whether how they react to it, how they act to it. Then you calculate the ROI for it. Now the timeline in order to see whether how long it's going to take the ROI, it all depends upon, it can actually take anywhere between 6 months to 1 year or beyond it. It depends upon the business. It depends upon the organization culture, how quickly they can adapt and adopt. So it's very relative and it's very tough to really to do a predictability like that. The problem is if the change mindset is not actually introduced properly in the beginning, your ROI doesn't matter whichever it is, whichever the project is, whichever, even if you take it in the pilot mode, you are going to be, it's going to be bigger failure. What are the importance of BDD and TDD in agile projects? Both of them actually plays a major role, to be very honest. It depends upon what you wanted to do. Sometimes some of the features you are actually going to do the TDD, right? Because it's an exploratory mode. You can actually do in both sides, or like both of those particular techniques. It depends upon what is your end goal is, what is your end objective is for that particular product that you are going to deliver it. It depends, and it can actually suit very well. But only thing is, do you have that kind of luxury of time that you wanted to put it on in order to explore such things? But I think that's very much applicable when you are actually doing any kind of new product coming into the market, trying to do a lot of assessment. This technique can actually be more suitable and it can fit in very well. And that's more important, especially from the agile project, because you are actually going to do a lot of exploratory and you are going to discover a lot of things, and at the same time you are also going to learn a lot of things out of the implementation. You might need to make refinement in your code, you might need to do refinement based on the user experience and the customer experience, how it's going to come in, etc. Okay. That concludes our today's webinar. And once again, thanks a lot for all the audience across the globe, whoever has participated. Really appreciate, and it really gives me more motivation to conduct a similar kind of webinars in the upcoming time.